The future of CBD in Europe. The emergence of CBD is driving product innovation on all fronts. Let's take a third-person view at shifting market regulations on cannabis extracts and the state of product supply chains at an EU level. Moderated by Richard Sharp, Cobidol and Kobe Chain. Speakers, John Liebling, Cannabis Patient Advocacy and Support Services. Henri Soncassia, the Cannabis Fund. Stephen Oliver, Canna Consultants. Dave Charnick, Calyx Development. Lizzie Jenkins, NextGen 360.
Everybody like the music? Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone. I would like to welcome everybody here to this gathering of industry leaders. Minister Cordoba, Malta parliamentarians, welcome. My name is Richard Sharp. It's my honor to be the moderator of this panel of esteemed colleagues here to discuss the future of CBD in Europe. On our panel today, we have experts covering the CBD supply chain, from patient concerns, manufacturers, the investment community, regulatory, and cultivation. Our objective is to shed light on the current state of the CBD industry in Europe and explore current challenges and potential scenarios for moving forward. This is an exciting topic that will be difficult to do justice in only 40 minutes, but we'll do our best to dig in and get the conversation started. First, a little bit about myself. As they announced, I'm the Chief Product Officer for Cobidol, a technology company that enables CBD companies with digital tools for commerce and supply chain transparency. My co-founders here are also here, Richard Scaife and Alex Goodyear. I'm also a medical cannabis patient. I'm also co-founder of a Canadian cannabis company called Mountain Valley MD. While I've been a part of this emerging industry for over 10 years now, I believe we are gathered here today at a very unique moment in time, an inflection point, if you will. I'd like to congratulate Minister Cardona. A year or so ago, I was here in Malta, and it's really impressive under your leadership and the parliamentarians, the way that you embraced medical cannabis for patients and the strides that you've made to bring this market into fruition. As you know, as you stated, Minister, we have constant change in this industry, and we all know that you have to constantly adapt to these changes. So today, we are also facing another big change in the market, which is going to be, I think, a central theme to this panel. I think in the not too distant future, the time that we are in right now will come to be known as the pioneering days of this new therapeutic health and wellness industry. And all of you here at Cannabis Malta are the industry pioneers. Welcome. I salute your vision and courage to be part of the change and innovation to unfold in the emerging years as we work together to build a world-class industry here in Europe. I would also like to thank the organizers of Medical Cannabis Conference, Eamon and Laura and many others of you, along with the Malta government for hosting this very important event. Wasn't last night's gala event a lot of fun?
Yes.
Yeah, it was great. Now we're just getting started. As all of you know, around the world, from Thailand to Canada to Europe and beyond, Decades of cannabis prohibition are being rolled back as an unstoppable trend, and new science and public awareness emerges around the multitude of health benefits that come from a plant that has long been a part of human history. Isn't it fitting then, kind of poetic even, that here we are in this beautiful, historic Malta, the seat of earliest human civilization, gathering to discuss how to nurture the reintroduction of one of nature's most important therapeutic substances? And while the times are exciting and the economic opportunity is great, the path forward is all but clear at this moment in time. In short, as you know, we are at a crossroads. After 20 years of a fairly hands-off approach, EU regulators were interest. Then, in January of this year, government authorities proposed to reclassify CBD as a novel food. If adopted, this would dramatically change an industry that already has hundreds of active companies selling hundreds of millions of dollars of products to millions of customers. So the horse is out of the barn. So what does the future of CBD look like here in Europe? Okay, let's get started and turn to our expert panel on this issue. I'm going to direct questions to panelists, and after they answer, other panelists will have an opportunity to add a few comments. Afterwards, we will try to have a little bit of Q&A. Okay, so our first question goes to Steve Oliver. As a regulatory expert, how might the application of novel foods classification to CBD products change the market that we see today across the supply chain? And what value do you think it brings to the industry?
Okay, thank you, Richard. Good morning, everybody. Novel food, it's an interesting regulation, and I listened with interest to the Minister, and she certainly has some very, very favourable aspirations for the European Union, and I hope that her colleagues share those aspirations, because one of the things that we're hearing and seeing is that those aspirations aren't shared. Novel food is essentially designed to protect us as individuals. It's there to look at new, novel techniques for creating food, digestibles. So we have vitamin K, we have extractions from Arctic krill, and we have bread, which is now cooked and baked with ultraviolet light, producing large amounts of vitamin D. To that background, we have cannabis, we have CBD, which has been around, and in one school of thought, for 3,000 years people have been using the benefits of cannabis. So there is an argument on one side, and I would suggest this is from the purists, that CBD shouldn't fall into the novel food category. But I think that's the wrong position to take. I think we all need to be honest here. It's the extraction, the method of production, and it is novel. So our position is that the novel food regulations are correct, the classification is correct, albeit that there may be a distinction for cold pressing and some natural extractions. But when we're using ethanol, solvents, when we're using CO2, and now we have emerging technologies which will take green, wet plant and use water for extraction, I think we need to embrace the regulations. Why do I say that? I say that because when Richard alluded to the fact that you're all pioneers, you can think of this as people traipsing across the west of America. And there's a core of people who are doing that because they want to further mankind, they want to explore boundaries, and they essentially want to make the world a better place. But alongside that, you have the bandits, you have the people who are there to take advantage of that situation. And we have a gung-ho industry. Separating medicinal cannabis from CBD as a food supplement, there is no regulation being enforced at the moment. We do have a situation in Austria where the regulators have removed products from shelves. In Ireland, the regulators, the FSAI, Food Standards Agency Ireland, have written to pharmacies and told them to remove the products. But in the rest of Europe, there is very little enforcement. If novel food applications are made, and at present my understanding is there's one from a company called Cannabis Pharma in the Czech Republic, at present we don't know when the determination will be made with regard to that. We also know that there's a challenge under Article 4 with regard to the classification. But the onus is on people who are growing, manufacturing, producing, selling to the end user to actually be honest about this. We have a situation where, without question, there are benefits for medicinal marijuana. We have a framework which exists throughout Europe which is preventing access to patients, with the exception of end life, to this wonderful new medicinal product. And consumers have established and driven a market because they're trying to supplement the absence of medicinal prescribed drugs with food supplements. So, novel food applications, if we have enforcement, then we will have success within the industry. But one of the key parts of the novel food regulations is that when an application is made, all of the product has to be removed from the market. And we don't, at this stage, know how long it takes for an application to be successful, or if indeed one will be successful. So we need engagement with the regulators. We need transparency, and we need them to provide us with guidelines so that those of us in the industry who are responsible can aim for high-quality products, make applications under the novel food regulations, but retain our market share. Otherwise, we end up with a grey market and we end up with a poor quality product, and that consumer detriment will have an adverse effect on the medicinal marijuana market.
Thanks, Steve. Very good answer. So, we have a... You make a very good argument for the importance of bringing in novel foods regulation and improving the quality for customers. Henri, from the perspective of an investment fund, we have a very established industry already. And of course, we want for countries like Malta that have taken a leadership role and have positioned themselves to be a major player globally. Is there a risk of disruption, or have we seen peak CBD? Where are we in this marketplace, and how do regulators manage to see this transition period in a way that is least disruptive and encouraging of the next phase of economic development?
Okay, 3 questions there, so we'll go through them sequentially. We're still in the cowboy phase. There are a vast number of CBD companies. It's very easy to set up a CBD company. You need a brand, you need a white label manufacturer, and you've got a CBD company. And the problem is not just cowboys. We're at the point where we're almost saturated with CBD. Even these multi-billion-dollar revenues that you see touted all over Europe, if you divide those numbers by the thousands of CBD companies, the net effect is that the average CBD company just isn't making money. It's very difficult to make profits. You've got price gouging, you've got lots of competition, you've got aggressive tactics, and I think what we need to see is almost a sort of cleaning out of the markets to leave the stronger, more competitive firms with the better products left. At the moment, it's an unmanageable mess. I've got a CBD company. I'm rapidly losing interest in it because it's just a pain in the arse, to be quite frank. The products are now getting more sophisticated, so you're starting to see CBD blended with terpenes, flavonoids, other cannabinoids, which are probably more interesting than CBD as a single molecule. So there's product evolution, there's too many companies. We're kind of on the cusp of a seismic change. I think there'll be a huge clear out. The companies that aren't making money will give up. Others will go bankrupt. And you'll start to see, and this is where we kind of blend into regulation, a difference between companies that are well capitalized, that can afford to comply with regulations, and companies that will struggle to do that. You've seen this in the vape and the e-cigarette industry. That was a cowboy market for many years. Suddenly the European Union introduced TPD, or the Tobacco Products Directive, and overnight all the small players folded. Interestingly enough, with that regulation, although the EU wanted the e-cigarette market regulated, they found it very difficult to enforce those regulations. So if you look at a market, say England, for example, very organised, long tradition of law and order. In England, it's quite easy to buy illegal, non-compliant e-cigarette products, even though it's tightly regulated. The local authorities haven't got the money or the patience to go around confiscating and testing products. So I think when we look at regulation in the European Union, we've got to look at enforceability. Can any particular country afford to test, send in mystery customers, blind test products, and take people to court if they break regulations? The danger, and certainly as a fund, as an investment fund, we're aware of this, is that excessive regulation will kill the market. If we spend too long in Europe following regulations that are 10,000 pages long, there'll be less innovation, there'll be less aggressive growth in the companies, and we will become kind of an extension of the European bureaucracy, whereas what we need is innovation, people that are very flexible in terms of their business practices and what they develop. And Europe has to remember it's not an isolated economic bloc. It's up against very sophisticated countries, Israel, Canada, the US. You're going to start seeing competition from Asia soon. When China gears up to start doing R&D and technical innovation, Europe has to be able to move at the speed of China, or Japan, or South Korea, or India, which is a giant economy that's going to come into this space. So Europe has to be conscious of flexibility and speed, I think.
You're talking about finding a balance.
Yes,
right,
it's
in regulation versus production. But the playing field is not going to be level when the estimates, I believe 8 months ago, there was an article written that the global CBD market would be $22 billion by 2024. I did the math on that 8 months ago, and that meant 550,000 acres grown. The United States handed out 510,000 acres of licenses. So they just grew the next 4 years of CBD production in one country. How does the EU sort of blend that in and not find the prices just dropping everywhere?
This is one of the biggest problems in the industry, and we see this as a fund. Every day we get new investment decks from somebody that's got 500,000 acres in South America. Somebody else has got 2 million acres in Africa. There is a huge danger, and you can see this already with pricing of CBD as a raw ingredient. There's a huge danger of commodification of pricing and just a glut. I used to run an organic cannabis farm in California. We were sort of on the cusp of legality. While it was still kind of a little bit dodgy, great. We got thousands of dollars a pound for what we produced. We had buyers coming to us. As it got easier to grow, the price dropped through the floor. And by the time I sold the farm, we were paying people to come and burn the product because it was rotting. There were people going around San Francisco with vans full of... And this is a real danger for Europe. We've got to somehow protect the price from going through the floor. We've got to look at quality rather than quantity, and we have to differentiate, because he's absolutely right. The bottom will fall out of the market if we're not careful.
That's great. Thank you. In the Canadian market, we've seen really the commodification of cannabis and the scale of production that has created such an amount of production that really the next opportunity, it seems, in the value chain is really in the manufacturing side and the creation of products and differentiated products. Lizzie, as a technical director at a manufacturer, what are you seeing, what challenges are you seeing that you want regulators to be thinking about when they, transition into this novel foods world, what are the issues in the value chain that you want to see addressed?
I think for us, quality is key, and the novel foods, we welcome it because part of the process is ensuring that the manufacturers are doing it to a great quality. I'd just like to reiterate what Henri said. You know, we are an e-liquid manufacturer. We've been through the Tobacco Products Directive, and pre-TPD, there was people making e-liquids in the bathtub and bottling it and selling it. And the TPD cleaned the market. A lot of people went out of business, but you know, it made way for people that were producing quality e-liquids, and I feel like that's what's going to happen here. People are making CBD in the back room because it's easy. As you said, you can make a CBD company overnight and you can go out there and sell CBD products, but are they of good quality? Probably not. Do they contain the CBD on the label? Probably not. And do they come with a lab certificate? Probably not. You know, people are out there, and we need to get consumers to trust us as an industry. And we've seen it in the e-liquid industry. People, everything that's going on in America at the minute, it's a massive media outcry, and we don't want to see that CBD market go in that same way. So we welcome novel foods. You know, we're working towards getting novel foods, but the challenge is quality and ensuring that every manufacturer that's producing e-liquids, tinctures, topicals work to the same quality and to the same safety aspects. And that could be having a minimum ISO qualification. It could be ensuring that you've got a quality management system in place, but you know, we need to ensure that we're seeing that out there to ensure that customers trust us. And I feel like that's the same with labelling. You know, it's very confusing having a percentage, a milligram per mil. If you're a consumer and you're going in there, you're overwhelmed by 15 products on the shelf and you don't know what you're picking up, and you don't know if 100 milligrams is more or less than 500 milligrams per mil. If 100 milligrams is in 10 mil, what does that mean it's in 30 mil? There's no sort of standardising labelling there. Which needs to be. Consumers, you want consumers to go in there, you want them to feel like they've got the power to make the right decision, and that takes me back to lab testing. And I think every single product should come with a lab certificate, and you know, working with Cobidol, it's fantastic because consumers can then track back and trace that and ensure that what they're buying actually has that amount of CBD. Just to touch on, we're part of the Centre for Medicinal Cannabis, and they did a report, and I think one of those products came out with no CBD in at all, and they were charging £70 for it. I mean, as a consumer, you pick that up, you pay £70, you're expecting a good quality product, not for it to have no CBD in at all. And I think that was a big shocker for us to kind of turn around and see that. I can't remember off the top of my head what the percentage was for having a lesser amount of CBD in, but it was high, wasn't it?
It was very high.
Yeah.
And in fact, of the products that we tested, so we tested around 30 of the most popular products that are currently on sale in the UK, and around 50% of the products we tested bared little relationship with the label that was actually there. I mean, of greater concern actually was some of the results that we got regarding testing of residual solvents.
Yeah.
You know, there are people out there using basically banned solvents, such as in 7 products out of the 30, we found dichloromethane, which is actually, you know, which has been shown to be carcinogenic. You know, my personal concern with that is whether you're looking at CBD products as a wellness product, or you know, a lot of patients out there are finding benefit in using it as a medicine. You know, you've got people whose immune system is compromised, who are actually consuming these products, and that, you know, to find things like that in these products is a very, very serious concern.
Yeah. It's
John, thank you. And as co-author of the report by the CMC, and you know, speaking on behalf of patients and customers, what you know, in our experience in Canada is that the industry cultivation side of the industry was very rapid to get into business and to go public and to have financial success. But the rollout of distribution for patients, not so much. A lot of bottlenecks, and so it perpetuated the black market for these products. So, you know, getting that transition right is critical, especially for the patients who this is what this is all for, ultimately, is to create a regulated market where What do you see the issues that at that, rather than have the tail wag the dog, from the sort of patient side of the perspective, what do you think the challenges that regulators should be considering as they look into this, move into this transition?
Well, I think there are kind of two directions from which I approach this, and one is these products being available are helping an awful lot of people who feel they get an awful lot of benefit from these products. And on that basis alone, patients are being able to get, let's say, cannabinoids into their system, where medical cannabis is still very much a struggle in the UK. So on that side, it's very, very positive. But when we did, as part of the Centre for Medicinal Cannabis, like you mentioned, we did a recent report. And, the market is huge. We're talking about around 4 to 5 million people in the UK have tried these products. About 1.3 million are regularly using these products. We're spending around about 300 million a year. The market is expanding in double-digit figures. We're looking at just in the UK by 2025 that this market is worth, £1 billion, which is huge. But this market has grown without any kind of regulation or control whatsoever. Like we mentioned, it's a deep concern that probably more than half of the products out there bear absolutely no relation to what they're actually saying that they're selling, and we were even able to show that even with exactly the same product and between two batches, the cannabinoid content within can vary by anything up to 85%. Now, additionally, because the Centre for Medicinal Cannabis decided to deep dive into this and do some proper analysis, there are one or two companies, as you mentioned, where we found, it's a high street, it's a flagship high street pharmacy product that we tested at 3 completely independent laboratories, and didn't find a cannabinoid in any of them, not a single one. It was basically olive oil, which, yes, is being sold on the high street for £90 for 10 millilitres, which is absolutely disgusting. But you cannot even move forward with doing anything about that company because none of our labs have agreed testing standards. Some of the labs don't have, for instance, the necessary licenses they need so that they can calibrate their testing equipment. And so, you test a single product at 4 different labs, and you're going to get 4 completely different results.
Right.
And whilst, from a patient perspective, we want these products to continue to be available. But in recent discussions with the regulators, we're under no illusions. This industry really does have to start regulating itself, sorting its life out, increasing quality. It needs to be applying for novel food regulations, which at the end of the day is the way one introduces new foodstuffs into the European food chain. This is standard, and just because it's cannabis doesn't mean it should be any different. And if that doesn't happen very, very quickly and very, very visibly, then our regulators are going to shut the industry down, which can't be good for anybody.
No. So those are great points. Thank you. So what are some of the solutions to some of these challenges? Aside from regulation, what are some of the approaches can the industry take a leadership role, and what does that look like?
I think the industry can definitely take a role. I think there's a large group of people that want to be out there selling quality products. The problem we have is there's no one enforcing these rules. Even when we get novel foods, who's going to be out there policing the industry? Trading standards don't want to touch it in the UK. The MHRA don't want to touch it in the UK. So, we can do everything we can to make sure that there's a quality and trusted product out there, but against the quality and trusted product, there's always going to be a product that hasn't been tested, that contains illegal concentrations of THC, and there's no one out there policing the market. So I think that's the number one issue we have to face.
I think we don't want to end up in a situation where history repeats itself, because although it sounds there's a lot of doom and gloom, I think we're by and large, we're all very positive about the industry because we believe in the products. And this is very, very focused on CBD. So what I don't want to see happen is we come back in 2 years' time and we hear the Minister talking about new innovations about CBG. So I think we have a level of intelligence that exists in this room which permeates into the consumer, which doesn't necessarily exist within the medical profession and within the regulatory profession. So they need to understand that CBD is one of a number of emerging cannabinoids which have wellness, supplementary health benefits. So let's learn from the way we deal with CBD, let's learn from the novel food regime, and let's not have a system where we fall into the same trap again as the consumer desires different cannabinoids or different concoctions or different mixtures or different ratios. And I think we could use this position with regulation and with proper aspirational vision, as we've heard from the Minister. I think we could plan for the future.
CBD is just the flavor of the day. There are hundreds of cannabinoids. I mean, if you read Dr. Ethan Russo or Sue Sicily, they talk about there could be 150 just waiting to be discovered. We just have to produce enough of the cannabis plant in volume so that we can make these extractions. And it's coming. Like you said, CBC, CBG, CBN. I mean, I don't want to see us competing with the pharmaceutical industry, but when population realizes that CBN is better than any Ambien they'll ever take for sleeping, then there's a multi-billion-dollar industry in jeopardy right now. So there's a battle to come, and it all comes back to quality, trust, transparency, and consistency of product. And we're never going to get that until we have some standard regulation across the board. I mean, my question to my esteemed colleagues up here would be how is the EU going to compete in what is a global cannabinoid economy when I'm helping a company in Colombia that last year grew nearly 4 million metric tons of sugarcane. So as we convert those lands to hemp, we'll be selling isolate for $200-300 a kilogram, turning it into an ingredient just like sugar, flour. How can you in the EU compete with that?
There's an inherent conflict, though, isn't there? Because most regulation in law is there to serve one or two purposes. It's either to control or protect. And it tends to be reactional. So you have the public out crying for politicians to take action. None of that exists with CBD and with medicinal marijuana because the public are crying out for access to it. So I think one of the solutions to the point you've raised is that the EU could actually be visionary. They could be proactive rather than reactive. They can see the problems that the industry is going to face, so they could provide solutions rather than waiting for the problem to land on their lap and then wait for many years.
It's coming quickly.
I think one of the other challenges, and it is perhaps unique to cannabis in this regard, is the fact that we've also, around those range of all of these cannabinoids, we also have a subset of those cannabinoids that in most countries are considered to be controlled, such as THC and CBN and what have you. And at the moment, certainly in the UK, our Home Office is rather intransigent on discussing the subject because in their view, as far as controlled cannabinoids are concerned, these products can have zero. Now, when you do a little dive, I think most scientists and academics understand that zero doesn't really mean zero, but they're not really engaging on that subject. Now, I think we have some room for manoeuvre, and I think actually the EU could provide the other countries with a bit of leadership in this regard and start talking about what is the maximum level of controlled cannabinoids that actually we should be tolerating in these products, because there's all sorts of implications to having to remove them. And I think that's one area that some of the countries need a little bit of leadership.
So you've unleashed the THC Kraken into the discussion. Just a second, Henri. So what you're saying is that there are medical benefits to THC. That we have these sort of extreme regulatory pathways. One is sort of a natural health product approach. The other is pharmaceutical. Is there a middle way? Should there be a middle way for products that are regulated, are very high quality in terms of the quality control, but have very small amounts of THC because, as we know, those of us in the industry, small amounts of THC are extremely helpful to amplifying the effects and benefits of the other cannabinoids.
Don't people always say that what does that cannabinoid cure? What does it help? isn't it possible that feeling good is good enough? And if the plant makes you feel good, that we can stop there for a minute, right? There's a certain demographic that's all they need. They just need to feel good and smile, and the cannabis plant can provide that. So I don't.
The wellness.
I'm all for feeling good, and I think I'm for whole plant. I like seeing all the cannabinoids blended together. But there's applications on both sides for molecular isolates.
The CBD industry at the moment, though, in Europe, is an unlawful industry because of novel foods. As we sit here and discuss it, there is not a single lawful CBD food supplement available to purchase across the European Union.
That needs to change.
But no, so fundamentally, if we as an industry then start to take the second argument, which is let's have some tolerance on THC, I think we need to double down and get this issue sorted first, I think.
I think it's easier than... Everybody talks about this, but we've done it with alcohol, we've done it with complex things like aircraft safety. There are people on the moon, all you have to do is introduce standards for labs, have a system where if you're importing or producing products, multiple labs have to sign off on it. Introduce a simple labelling system. How much is in it? What percentage is it? What's the daily dose? I mean, it doesn't... the people in this room could come up with this policy in 10 minutes. And just get some simple regulations out there and then enforce them. Have a system where you can report a company, the police or another authority or the weights and measures in the UK turn up and confiscate products and arrest people when there are breaches of the law. This happens every day with alcohol.
Yeah.
If I put petrol in my, bottles of wine, put them on sale, sell them to 14-year-olds, overcharge them, I will go to jail. I can't understand why it's so difficult to do this for a plant. It's not that complex. My advice to the EU would be a simple set of regulations that are tightly enforced, not some huge document that's difficult to interpret. It just needs to be simple, enforced, and through enforcement the EU will learn how to nuance the regulations in future and fine-tune them. But you've got to start with something basic, and that would be enough, really.
And as we know, the World Health Organization has already stated that the safety profile of CBD really comes down to interactions with other drugs or medications you might be taking. So it's essentially a safe product. Of course, when it's regulated properly and tested and has quality control. To
take Henri's point, if we actually did have somebody putting petrol into CBD, we'd probably have a very well-regulated market. we don't have enough customer complaints because of ignorance, to a certain extent.
And there's nobody they can go to. The best you can do is take it back and shout at the people that sold it to you. You can't... or vandalise their shop fronts. I mean, you'd have to take kind of direct action because there just isn't anybody that you can go to. And in England, certainly, if you go to trading standards and say, I bought this, it's absolute crap, can you do something about it? They will just look at you as if you've just announced you're from Mars.
And also, if you have a very restrictive regulations, we have online sales now, which are extremely difficult to police. So, to make a framework that's easy to embrace is important. I wanted to just potentially open up the floor to some questions, if we could.
One thing I'd like to point out is for anybody out there, and please tell this to your friends, people will ask me all the time, what's the best product on Amazon to buy for CBD? And I tell them, the moment you go to Amazon, it will not contain CBD. So stay away from that. There are going to come, your company, I represent a company in the United States that's doing their best to bring trust and transparency. We're not pioneers. We're before pioneers. We're in the dark ages right now, and we're going to look back on this in 10 years and go, we actually had to argue about that. It's just ridiculous. It's coming. It's coming.
Well, thank you very, very much. I wanted to see if there were any questions from the floor. Yes, sir? I don't know if there's a mic, if you just want to stand up and, yeah, shout out your question.
Yeah, how much of the CBD story do you think is reluctance around that? Is that caught up with the recreational cannabis story? I get the sense sometimes that the public and maybe the politicians fear if they look at CBD, or maybe to a certain extent medical cannabis, it somehow lets the recreational cannabis world in, and there's possibly a political nervousness about that. Yes. Any thoughts on that?
It's tainted. The whole industry is tainted. It comes with baggage from decades ago, from the kind of reefer madness era, where you started to see the media and government basically saying anything that comes off that plant is bad. And that has really kind of got into people's subconscious, and it's quite difficult to shift it. It makes regulators nervous. It makes enforcement agents like Border Control or Border Force overzealous. It makes consumers cautious. And because of that hint of illegality, it attracts cowboys, because it's seen as a borderline product. And that's what cowboys are looking for. They're looking for grey areas, areas of banditry that they can kind of get involved in. And that taint is enormously damaging. It's still holding the industry back. Less so in North America, but if you look at Asia or Singapore or Saudi Arabia, I wouldn't want to be a Saudi with a disease that could be cured by cannabis and have to try and persuade my friends or the local police that, you know, I just needed a bit of a plant to heal myself, because that would be an uphill battle. And that's very bad for the industry. We need to lose that baggage and look at what it actually does rather than what we've been told.
They're playing us off.
Do we have time for one more question? No. One more question? Okay. Yes, sir.
Just shout.
They might not give you a mic.
I'll shout it out.
Sure, shout it out.
We discussed in there in relation.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Stephen, you was talking quite in depth about the Novel Foods Act, and we're also talking about simple packaging regulation at the same time. Now, I kind of looked into the novel foods, and it's pretty much just short of a medical application.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm all for a product to go down this route. However, we've just seen this in the e-liquid industry, I think we've spoken about, where the TPD was put into place. However, there was a massive loophole at the bottom of the TPD, which allowed inferior products onto the market. Now, what safeguards are there with the Novel Foods Act that doesn't happen to this industry?
Great question.
Great question. There are none. Okay, so one of the barriers to making a novel food application at the moment is cost, another is time, and the third is proprietary information and how you protect your patented application. So we may know from the Czech company, we know that they've made an application that limits the amount of CBD to be ingested in a 24-hour period. We know that they're excluding pregnant women. We know that they're excluding breastfeeding. We don't know what the determination will be, and we don't know whether other companies will be able to piggyback on that investment and essentially submit a copied dossier. So until the European Union give us some more information, until our local, and by local I mean in each of our individual member states, until we're given some direction, I don't believe there are sufficient safeguards for individual companies to take such a large financial and time and commercial risk at the moment. So I think there's certainly is a need for the applications to be made, and I think a collaboration is potentially the best way of achieving that.
So, Steve, you get the last word on this. Thank you very much. Thanks for the question. Thank you, audience, Minister, parliamentarians, and industry visionaries and pioneers. I think obviously we've started a conversation that will last for the next 2 days and coming weeks and years. Thank you very much for your attention, and see you around. Thank you.